Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to been waiting for. Today we witness a clash of titans, an epic debate that will shake the very foundations of the accounting world. On one side, we have those advocating for a universal accounting theory, a single global standard that will transform financial reporting forever. On the other side, we have the champions of flexibility, who argue that a one-size-fits-all approach simply won't work. Introducing first, fighting for the universal accounting framework, we have the brilliant minds who believe in consistency and comparability. Hailing from Orlando, Florida, and known for her passion for problem-solving, leadership, and an unhealthy love for spreadsheets, let's give it up for the one and only Mikayla Willaman. And joining her, bringing her strategic insight, unmatched dedication, and an obsession with order that borders on legendary, representing Port St. Lucie, Florida, it's Claudia Magne. And now, fighting against the universal framework, the defenders of flexibility and innovation, we have the fearless fighters who believe that accounting must adapt to the complexities of today's world. First, from the sunny streets of Port St. Lucie, she's the tax guru who brings vast knowledge of accounting strategy and implementation. Give it up for Sydney Holtzclaw. And joining her, the business genius, amazingly handsome, world-renowned for his humility, and the founder of Albers Financial LLC, the pride of Orlando, Austin Albers. And now, from the heart of the city, beautiful Orlando, Florida, where arguments are set to ignite and great minds are set to collide. It's time for the moment you have all been waiting for. Live from Edition Financial Arena on the campus of the greatest college in the world, UCF. Gray Matter Media presents Universal Standards, Necessary or Not.
Hello, my name is Mikayla Willaman. I'm here with Austin, Sydney, and Claudia. And today we will be discussing whether a universal accounting theory is necessary or not. Here's our table of contents for today. We will be going over both sides' arguments and rebuttals, and then each party will discuss their closing statements. My name is Mikayla Willaman, and I'll be going over the first two affirmative arguments. The first one is improved comparability and consistency. A universal theory of accounting would significantly enhance the comparability and our economy is becoming more and more globalized, where investors and stakeholders always need to compare financial information from entities operating under different accounting standards. Because of this, a universal theory would provide a common language for financial reporting, which will reduce discrepancies caused by varying national standards. Comparability is not a luxury, it's a fundamental requirement in today's markets. A unified theory would also promote consistency in accounting practices over time. Consistency is the bedrock of trust in financial markets. The ongoing use of divergent accounting methods erodes this trust, breeding skepticism and volatility. Each accounting scandal that erupts due to exploited differences in standards chips away at investor confidence. A universal theory would eliminate these loopholes, forcing a level of consistency that leaves no room for financial sleight of hand. Furthermore, a comprehensive accounting theory would provide a stronger and a more reliable basis for economic decision-making by various stakeholders, including investors, creditors, and management. A universal theory would ensure that financial statements provide more relevant, reliable, and comparable information, leading to better informed decisions. Enhanced decision-making is not just about making better choices. It's about survival in an increasingly competitive global landscape. In the absence of a universal theory, companies are making strategic decisions based on incomplete or misleading information. I'll now pass it to Claudia to discuss the two other arguments from the affirmative side.
Yes, I am Claudia Magne, and the next supporting reason for why we should have a universal accounting standard is because the switch is highly supported. The switch from a national accounting standard such as GAAP to a uniform accounting standard is highly supported by many individuals, organizations, and countries. The World Trade Organization and World Bank, which deals with international trade and business affairs, are in support of the switch to the Universal Accounting Theory Standard, possibly the IFRS. Another organization that supports the transition to the use of the IFRS standard as the universal standard is the USA's Security Exchange Commission. In 2010, the SEC said that the IFRS is going to become the universal accounting standard, and accountants and businesses must prepare to eventually change in the future. Countries also highly support the transition to a universal accounting theory standard by having 100 countries and 12,000 businesses already transitioned to the IFRS accounting standard. Some of the other countries include the European Union, the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada, and Australia, which all require the use of IFRS for domestic public companies. As you can see, these countries are well-developed countries. Other developing countries are considering transition to use of IFRS standard as well. So this is the reason why that it is highly supported. And finally, the last reason why there should be a uniform accounting standard is the accountants are able to be more flexible. By having a uniform accounting standard, accountants are able to be more flexible with their jobs and work. Specifically in the United States, accountants are restricted in the jurisdiction that they are able to work at. When there is a situation where a company must report under the IFRS or have implications internationally, our accountants would not be prepared. By having a uniformed accounting standard, American accountants would be more knowledgeable and not limited to businesses, specifically in America, that use GAAP. This would also allow accountants not to be restricted geographically. American accountants cannot easily move to another country or work for another company in another country because of the different standards. If there was a universal standard, then it would not matter where the accountants work or who they work for, making it more flexible for accountants overall. And now I will be handing it over to Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney, and I will be discussing the first two opposing arguments, which is flexibility drives innovation, not comparability, and simplified decision-making does not or equals simplified failures. So starting off, flexibility drives innovation, not comparability. If you were to use a universal accounting system, it's not able to accommodate complex businesses like we have in our everyday life. Innovation won't flourish under these frameworks, and we are able to progress in the accounting world when we are able to challenge certain norms. The notion that a single accounting framework can accurately represent every business is just flawed. Traditional accounting methods already struggle to capture certain values of things like intangible assets, intellectual property, and other things. For instance, how do you quantify the worth of self-learning AI algorithm or decentralized blockchain network using conventional metrics? Forcing these assets into outdated accounting categories will distort their true value. Considering the dominance of the Big Four accounting firms, they audit a significant majority of the world's largest companies. This creates a bottleneck in conventional thinking. According to the US Government Accountability Office, these firms audit over 98% of public companies with revenues exceeding $1 billion. This concentration of power stifles innovation in accounting practices and enforces a one-size-fits-all approach that does not serve the diverse needs of modern business. Historical events highlight these pitfalls of rigid accounting standards, as we saw from the Enron and WorldCom scandals. Research by Cavell and Nobes found that the adoption of International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS, intended to enhance comparability, which will often lead to decreased financial transparency. Similarly, Lang revealed that switching from IFRS does not necessarily improve the accuracy of financial reporting or decision-making. The 2008 financial crisis serves as a stark example of how inflexible accounting standards can exuberate economic downturns. Market-to-market accounting rules forced institutions to value assets at severely depreciated market prices, amplified financial turmoil. This demonstrates that the real-world consequences of applying rigid standards in complex, rapidly changing environments. So, for the next point, simplified decision-making equals simplified failures. When we looked at the single rigid framework that we would be applying, it can't represent all of the diverse industries and businesses out there. In practice, these standardized systems oversimplify these complex financial landscapes. This can lead to misguided decisions that can have catastrophic consequences. If we look at the 2008 financial crisis, standardized accounting frameworks like GAAP and IFRS were in place, yet they failed to prevent this economic meltdown. In fact, these standards allowed financial institutions to obscure the true extent of their risk exposure. The more complex financial instruments, like mortgage-backed securities and derivatives, were inadequately represented under these existing accounting rules. This lack of transparency contributed significantly to the misinformed decisions that participated in this crisis. Research also supports this critique. Studies done by Lang, Moffitt, and Owen suggest that adopting IFRS does not necessarily improve the accuracy of financial comparability or enhance decision-making. Their findings indicate that IFRS aims to create a uniform reporting language. It often falls short in providing nuanced information necessary for stakeholders to make informed choices. The one-size-fits-all approach just can dilute these details and cause problems. And then next, I will be passing it on to Austin.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sydney. So next, I'm going to be covering the myth of a smooth transition. Now, this myth is based around the fact that a smooth global transition to a universal accounting standard is just unrealistic, and countries and industries just vary too much in their legal frameworks and also their business environments in order for this to be a smooth process that can be effectively implemented. Now, one quote that I'd like to reference when talking about this fact is that this one, which says the success of the IFRS adoption is heavily dependent on the legal and institutional settings of individual countries. So as you can see, accounting is just a complicated topic overall, and it's not something that can ever be applied with a one-size-fits-all knowledge. Now, we have to be more practical when we think about this narrative because there's already such significant influence uh, imposed by the already existing standards. And while this idea might suggest a more streamlined and efficient global marketplace, it fails to account for the disproportionate challenges and also the disruptions that it poses to emerging markets and especially smaller firms and businesses. Now, I'm going to cover a few different topics on this topic. So there's disproportionate burdens on these small companies in these new markets. So implementing these standards like the IFRS requires a bunch of resources and specialized knowledge. So smaller companies and firms simply don't have the resources or knowledge bases in order to implement these standards, allowing the monopolies and the bigger companies in the world to take advantage of these facts and be able to hold a monopoly as well as strategic and competitive advantages over these smaller markets and these smaller firms and companies. Now, this also skews advantages just towards those established players. So the monopolies, the multinational corporations, and also just the wealthier nations will be able to stay on the top of the game, and it just decreases competition overall. It creates a rigid game, a rigid scenario with strict rules that everyone must follow, but not everyone has the resources or capacity to follow. And it creates an illusion of uniformity, which just leads to more distorted financials than ever before. And there's a case for decentralization and adaptability. There's a more equitable and effective approach, which lies in embracing decentralization and adaptability in accounting practices. We should tailor our accounting standards to reflect local economic realities and business environments, which allow for more accurate and meaningful financial reporting. And these aren't just my words, this is coming from a 2017 study by Hopper. Now, this flexibility empowers smaller firms and companies and emerging markets to present their financial health much more transparently without being constrained by the ill-fitting universal standards that are being suggested here today. Next, I'm going to cover the next topic, which is true flexibility, and it's not achieved through universal standards. Now, accountant flexibility is constrained under a universal standard, especially in rapidly evolving sectors like AI, fintech, and blockchain, which are clearly becoming the leading force in the global economy. If you look at the United States stock market, for example, the S&P 500 over the last 4 years has been undoubtedly powered by the seven biggest, largest tech stocks, which are powering the total fund. If you look at the index as a whole and take out these seven stocks, the growth has not been that good, which is a prime example of how these standards are just not one size fits all. The reporting of companies that are along these lines and this big and massive is going to be completely different than a new upstart company, even in the same market. Now, let's look at some real examples from different firms, right? So, the Big Four, for example, there's no doubt that they hold a near monopoly over the global auditing market. When it comes to public companies, no one else holds a candle to the Big Four. And while the partners of these firms may enjoy soaring earnings and with the average partner pay reaching significant heights, the junior auditors who come in are facing stagnating wages and terrible working conditions. I don't even have to refer to recent events for you to know what those are and what's happened at some of the specific Big Four firms, specifically in the country of India lately with their employees. These standards are what keep these lower level workers living in these terrible working conditions with stagnant wages. They're rules put into place to support a system that does not work. It's a system that supports mediocrity and doesn't allow for advancement. Allowing accountants to be flexible and not holding them to a rigid universal standard and framework would allow for accountants to advance as a profession, for accountants to become and offer their services not as commodities anymore, but as valued products, and for these firms to not hold audit and tax services as loss leaders, but actually as value add services. Next, I'm going to pass it back over to the opposing team to talk about the rebuttals for the affirmative side of things. Or actually, sorry, I'm going to cover the opposing rebuttals, our rebuttals first. So first, I'm going to cover challenging the notion of universal accounting standards specifically in this era. We are in an era of innovation unlike ever before. The concept of improved comparability through universal accounting standards appears pretty beneficial at first glance, and my opposing counterparts made some great points talking about this. However, this notion does not assume a homogeneity, or it does assume a homogeneity among companies that simply just does not exist in reality. Compare the cutting edge tech with a company like Tesla with a traditional automaker like Ford. Under the same accounting framework, it can be akin to comparing apples to oranges, or perhaps more accurately, apples to spaceships. Now, these comparisons can be misleading and fail to capture the unique value propositions and business models of different companies, inherently crushing the whole purpose of our license and our jobs. Because really, in reality, these standards lead to misleading shareholders more than if they didn't exist or existed at a more local economy scale. Now, secondly, I'm going to cover the fallacy of enhanced comparability in decision making. Now, universal accounting standards like the IFRS aim to provide consistency across financial statements. However, this uniformity can strip away the nuanced narratives behind the numbers. According to a study by Yip and Young, the adoption of IFRS did not necessarily lead to increased comparability, but actually didn't help at all. And there was less enforcement across countries due to the variations. Now, investors require more than standardized numbers. They need context, they need flexibility to understand a company's unique business model and growth potential. This is about giving investors the most information that they need to make an informed decision, and not necessarily investors, but the investing public as a whole. If we put financial statements in different formats, we could put things in easier to understand context. To begin with, the average everyday investor does not understand that the rules of accounting. So why do we try to pretend like they do by making this improved comparability and pushing these universal standards? Now, next, I'm going to pass on to the myth of a seamless transition, which is just this proponent that pushes a universal accounting theory, and then it touts that there's going to be this highly supported transition as a key benefit of that. However, this perspective underestimates the bureaucratic challenges and resistance that such a shift is going to entail. Implementing a universal standard across all countries and businesses, or even just across the United States for all different classes of businesses and industries, would be just a monumental task, not even taking into account the different industries, markets, business organization types, and beginning with that. And these emerging technologies, specifically like blockchain and AI, aren't going to fit neatly into these frameworks. And that's not coming from me as well. That's Schmidt and Mueller, written in 2019. Now, forcing conformity could stifle innovation and adaptability. These are going to leave companies ill-equipped to navigate the fast-paced evolution of these modern markets. And the future of finance demands agility, not cumbersome compliance with these outdated standards and, quite frankly, boomer ideology. Now, finally, I'm going to talk about the contradictory claims of accountant flexibility. Now, the notion that would enjoy greater flexibility within a universal theory is contradictory. However, in reality, such a theory would impose rigid guidelines that limit accountants' ability to adapt to the specific needs of innovative businesses. Flexibility in accounting should empower professionals to accurately reflect a company's financial health and not constrain them within a predetermined framework. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we need to embrace this flexibility, actually. The future of our profession lies in developing dynamic, adaptable frameworks that can accommodate the complexities of modern day businesses. These frameworks are going to allow a more accurate depiction of financial health first and foremost, which is going to foster better decision making among investors and the public as a whole, and creating a more fair marketplace, which is destroying a system that has existed for hundreds of years to allow the 1% and the big corporations and these major ETF and S&P funds to take advantage of the fact that these structures exist and unfairly represent the whole financial statements when it comes to emerging markets and complicated industries. Now, they provide guidelines that require professional judgment, which would enable accountants to account for the nuances of different industries and business models, right? That's what these, if we were to just do a universal theory, it would not work like this. Now, this approach would promote transparency and relevance and ensure that financial reports provide meaningful insights rather than just compliance with uniform standards if you embrace and encourage flexibility and allow for accountants to maybe even possibly just excel and be something more than average and follow these strict guidelines and rules. Now, in conclusion, the push for a universal accounting theory overlooks the diverse and evolving nature of modern business. Improved comparability, simplified decision-making, and a seamless transition are ideals that do not hold up under scrutiny. Instead of imposing rigid, one-size-fits-all standards, we should focus on developing flexible, forward-thinking accounting frameworks that can adapt to the rapid pace of innovation. By doing so, we enable companies to accurately represent their financial realities, empower their investors with meaningful information, and support the continued growth of dynamism within the global economy. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass it off to Claudia to cover the affirmative rebuttals.
Yes, I am Claudia. Thank you, Austin. So I'm going to start off with our affirmative rebuttals. The first one, in contrast to the opposing team, flexibility is not the reason for innovation. The reason for comparability is because there is an increasing number of businesses that are making transactions outside of their home country or have subsidiaries in other countries, which is going to increase the need for a comparable accounting standard in order to be able to assist with better accounting decisions. It is up to the company and accountant to determine the best way to evolve the business, even with a uniform standard. With the same standards, they will be able to decide as a whole business rather than separate entities, which would drive positive business decisions. There is a quote by Brilliant Paper stating that the increased internationalization of business processes means an intensified search for uniformity of an accounting theory that can address all issues in a same manner across all financial markets. This is why we need increased comparability and consistency across the globe. For their second opposition, the opposing team is arguing that simplified decision-making equals simplified failures, which is not accurate. If the Universal Accounting Standard transitioned to be the IFRS, then it would be based off of principle-based meaning. There would be more room for management to use accounting to the highest extent for complex companies and increase better decision-making. With rule-based accounting, GAAP companies must use these specific rules already made for them rather than determining the best decision per situation. According to a study by Sharman and Gornick, the principle-based approach reflected in IFRS, is, if adopted, will require future accountants and auditors to exercise professional judgment more often and to a greater degree than ever before. For the third reason, whether it will be a smooth transition or not, according to the opposing team, it is actually very necessary and it is inevitable. Multiple organizations believe that the transition to IFRS will eventually happen. On top of that, multiple other countries are using IFRS, which is growing as a possible uniform standard. If other countries with the same amount of complexity can switch, then many other countries can as well. For the last opposing point, according to the IFRS, transparency, accountability, and efficiency are the main priorities of the Universal Accounting Standard. The IFRS will be able to adapt to ever-changing environments in order to provide a high-quality accounting standard for businesses across the world. Stated by the IFRS, the European Commission in 2015, Australian Accounting Standard Board 2016, and the Korean Accounting Standard Board 2016 all agreed that adopting the IFRS standard was more than a benefit to their accounting systems. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney, and I will be going over our closing statement. So now at the end of the debate, we see that while a universal accounting theory may sound like a good solution, when you dig deeper into it, you can see that it's not necessary and it can be harmful. It limits innovation, it prevents businesses from telling their real financial story, and it will lock the entire economy into a rigid framework that will not adapt to the pace of modern business. If we break down our arguments again, we don't necessarily need comparability if it's going to come at the cost of flexibility. Businesses are unique and they have unique transactions and other cycles that they go through. Flexibility helps drive this innovation, and without it, we will lose the creativity that'll power our economy. Simplified decision-making can be good in theory, but it can also lead to simple failures. The 2008 financial crisis is proof that when you oversimplify, you miss the hidden risks beneath the surface. We need detailed, nuanced reporting to make smart, informed decisions. There's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. Next, a smooth global transition is really just not realistic. Trying to force every economy, industry, and business into one accounting framework will create friction and cause other issues. Emerging markets will struggle, smaller businesses will be crushed, and the system will become more fragmented. Finally, true flexibility isn't found within these rigid frameworks. Accountants need the freedom to adapt to emerging technologies, to tailor to their work, and the specified needs of their business. Universal standards are obsolete the minute they're implemented. The future is an adaptable, dynamic system. At the end of the day, it's not about accounting, it's about business itself. And next, I'm going to pass it over to Mikayla to do the closing statements for the affirmative team.
Thank you, Sydney. This is Mikayla, and I'll be discussing the affirmative side closing statement. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this debate, let's reflect on what has been discussed. The claim that a universal accounting theory is unnecessary and harmful fundamentally misunderstands its purpose and potential benefits. The absence of a universal accounting theory is no longer merely an inconvenience, it's a critical liability in our interconnected world. A universal accounting theory doesn't limit innovation, it fosters it. It doesn't suppress creativity, it provides a common language that allows innovative ideas to be clearly communicated and understood across borders and industries. When everyone speaks the same financial language, it becomes easier to recognize and appreciate truly innovative approaches. A universal accounting theory enhances, rather than prevents, authentic financial storytelling. A standardized framework doesn't necessarily mean it's a one-size-fits-all reporting standard. Instead, it provides a consistent structure within which businesses can highlight their unique aspects. This actually makes it easier for companies to tell their real financial story, as stakeholders can quickly identify what makes a company stand out when the baseline is inconsistent, or when the baseline is consistent. Flexibility, not rigidity, is the goal. The idea that a universal accounting theory creates a rigid, unadaptable framework is a misconception. A well-designed universal theory would be principles-based, allowing for adaptation to new business models and technologies. The aim is to create a flexible foundation that can evolve with the pace of modern business, not to lock it into place. The need for an universal accounting theory has never been more pressing. As our global economy becomes increasingly interconnected, the disparities in accounting practices across nations and industries create significant challenges, some of which include lack of comparability, regulatory arbitrage, evolving economic realities, and enhanced transparency and trust. The evidence is clear. From the increasing frequency of cross-border transactions to the rise of digital assets and the growing complexity of complexity of financial instruments, our current patchwork of accounting approaches is struggling to keep pace. A universal accounting theory is not just desirable, it is essential for ensuring the reliability, relevance, and comparability of financial information in our interconnected world. The path to developing such a theory may be challenging, requiring collaboration among academics and regulators around the globe. However, the potential benefits far outweigh the costs. It is time for the accounting profession to unite behind this crucial endeavor and work towards a truly universal accounting theory that can serve as the bedrock of financial reporting in the 21st century and beyond. Thank you so much. That is our presentation on universal accounting theory, whether it's necessary or not. Again, my name is Mikayla Willaman. I'm here with Austin, Sydney, and Claudia. And here's our works cited. There are also references included throughout the presentation in the notes if you would like further details on where we got our information and our points from. But other than that, thank you so much, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Nice.
Coming up next, the Horse Project. What exactly is the fair value of a horse in today's market? Stay tuned for the next explosive debate on one of the most unique and controversial topics in finance.
This has been a production by Grey Matter Media, where creativity meets intelligence, a Albers Financial subsidiary company.